This is the Conservative Czar, December 14th, 2016. There's a risk that people are not putting in the equation with Donald Trump. And I want to talk about the foreign policy of Donald Trump. It's a foreign policy I support, but there are fundamental risks to this kind of foreign policy. The foreign policy I support has risks. Trump's foreign policy, which I support 100% at this particular moment in time, has risk. And here are the risks, and the risks have to do with China and Russia. Each one separately. Let's take China first. I've discussed this before in another video called War with China. That Donald Trump is considered himself a great negotiator. He's willing to give, but he needs to take from somebody. Somebody has to give. I mean, he is not going to give everything and not get anything in return. That's his art of the deal, and that is reasonable in dealing with business people, but it's not when you're dealing with China, which is everything is decided by maybe one person, maybe a little group of five. No one really knows who makes the decisions in Russia, but it looks to be between 1 and 5 people make the fundamental decisions on China, and they are not used to giving in on anything. And the risk of this with China is that that Chinese misread everything, and they stick to their guns and not give in on anything. Remember, Trump's looking for help on North Korea. He's looking for help on trade, tariffs, taxes. He's looking for help on Taiwan. He's looking for help on the South Sea. He wants a broad agreement covering all these issues. He might, and the Chinese might not. This one person or 5 people might get their backs up, and so all of a sudden Trump can't get a deal. All right, it doesn't get a deal, and what do the Chinese do? They escalate. They escalate militarily, and that escalation means that we would escalate. And Donald Trump is faced with a situation where negotiation failed, and his backdrop is against an aggressive Chinese is to be a tough guy and increase militarily. This is a risk we create, but Obama and even Bush never would take this risk, this fundamental risk. So they kept giving in to the Chinese. In effect, they gave the Chinese the reason to be tough, because they have learned that if they're tough, then the Americans will back down. But here we have Trump. They're going to be tough. He's not going to back down. He'll compromise on a lot of things, but he won't fundamentally back down. He is not going to deal with somebody who will not give him anything. And that's the issue. So China escalates. Trump's United States escalates. The increased chance of war with China is on the table when you have this tough set of negotiations that you want to get through. I believe it's the right way to go. That otherwise we will be beaten up by China for the next 100 years. Donald Trump has to make a stand, and be prepared for a military action if worse comes to worse. Now, the Chinese will be the aggressors. They will build more islands in the South Sea. They'll threaten directly Taiwan. They will escalate. They will encourage North Korea to develop nuclear weapons now. So all of these things point to risk that Donald Trump is taking. Necessarily, he has to take it to fight back, but it's risk nonetheless. Quickly go to Russia. We always talk about Russia being friends with the United States, friends with Trump and Tillerson and the foreign policy team, and they are. They are. Donald Trump wants to have negotiations with Russia, but what if? See, Donald Trump believes in red lines. He believes if we make a deal and you say you're not going to do this, you better not do this. Putin might not be that kind of animal. he says, "I got a deal. Let's see if I can. Push back and take a little bit more. The deal's signed. It's a red line, but I'm gonna test it." And against Trump, that could be a very bad thing. Again, the same principle with China is that when you deal with Putin, Donald Trump is going to have red lines through negotiations that Putin is going to agree to. If Putin violates or tests those lines, Donald Trump is going to go back against Putin harder than Clinton, Obama, or anybody else would ever go back against them because they're fundamentally afraid of him. Donald Trump wants negotiations, wants compromise on both sides. He wants an agreement with a red line. You cross this, we get trouble. It's up to Putin to make sure that red line is followed. Make sure he understands who he is dealing with. He wants good relationships with Russia, but those are on terms. And if you violate those terms, Donald Trump's going to come down on you. And that's the risk. So the risk is fundamentally, when you enter into negotiations with superpowers, and you want a fundamental, far-reaching negotiations, you want them to compromise. That's the first thing. They might not. I think Putin will compromise, but China might not. And if they do, what's next? It's bad things next. And so that's the risk of this negotiated foreign policy. It's easy for things to go a little bit awry and create a military confrontation. So I'm emphasizing, I believe that the Donald Trump foreign policy in all of its aspects is the right way to go. But there are risks. Everybody better understand the risks. This is the Conservatives Are. See you next time.